Hey everybody, welcome back. If you guys are new to the channel, you probably won't see why we're doing this, but for those of you who are subscribed, thanks for coming back. And the new ones, hey, welcome. What we're going to do is, the last video, we had this M12, and we tore it apart because we had excessive play in our crank bearings. Well, I went to my local hobby shop, and I guess these are a little bit more common than you'd think to find. They're a 5mm by 10mm by 4mm wide bearing. So we've got new bearings for it. So let's get after it, and we'll put this little guy back together and fight through the timing, and we'll get it to run again. Alright, let's go. So it's all been cleaned and degreased, so that'll make assembly a whole lot better. And we're going to use a couple different products today because, well, this plug that goes in the bottom here, that goes down here, it is sealed with an O-ring, but obviously that O-ring doesn't seal tight enough because we had oil down here in the bottom of this on our last one. So we're going to use some anaerobic gasket maker, which dries with lack of oxygen, so that'll seal that up. And here on our cam chest, I'll get closer so you guys can see, and hopefully this thing will focus. But here they are shim washers. I'll get this other one off so you can see it. And hopefully it'll show up. You can see how that's bent over. Hopefully, there you go. Because these screws pass through these holes. The back side of these holes are open, and that's our cooling jacket in there. So to seal that, 592, it's a thread sealant. And to make sure that our bearings stay retained on our crank, we're going to use some green Loctite just to hold them in place, so we know that hopefully this is the last time we ever have to do this. So, okay, I'm not sponsored or affiliated with any of Permatex or Loctite, so that's just, if you guys are wondering what we're using, that's what it's going to be. So, alright, well, we can get this guy out of the road, take our old bearing and toss him off to the side. We'll cut this new bearing package open. These bearings are a little bit different because, I'll show you this old one again. These are metal shielded, and the new ones are rubber sealed. Hopefully that shows up. This little guy's gonna roll away, because in our previous video we could see oil residue here. So we had a main bearing leak. Well, let's see how well these bearings fit. They have a little bit of play on them, but the quality of these bearings are much better than the factory ones. And, we got shims here for our side-to-side play in the crank. We'll put them back on. Alright, let's see how they fit in our bearing caps. Those fit in there really well. They feel good. They don't have near the end play in them if they did. So, yeah. Alright, well, let's get this thing put back together and make something happen. Yeah, that when I took these bearings out, it was a challenge. I had to use my scribe, and I was able to just get under the lip of that bearing and tap it out with, just a little soft-faced hammer here. But yeah, I was able to get them out. They didn't fight too bad. But okay, well, I will get these bearings put onto the crank, and we'll be right back. We've got our bearings on the crank, and I did put the green Loctite on there. It's been about 15 minutes or so. They've set up so we know that they're secure. They spin very nice and free. So, alright, well, we know that our crankshaft is good to go. Let's look at our block here. Get our little plug out of the road. And even though this engine doesn't have much time on it, and this piston ring looks just fine, I don't see anything wrong with it. I do have one new spare one. I really don't want to tear this guy apart again, so we're going to go ahead and change this ring. Pull the old one off and set him over here. Get our new one and just walk it on and make sure it's not bound up. Put a couple drops of just straight 30 oil on it. And I had a comment about what oil I used, and I should be more clear on this, guys. I assume way too much, and that's not right. It's not fair to you. But when I say SAE 30 or straight 30, this is what I'm talking about. It's just SAE 30. It is not non-detergent. It's just a straight non-multi-viscosity oil. So, okay, well, now that we've got that done, so let's get our piston put back in this little guy. And I did mark this right here. It's probably not going to show up as to which side went to our oil fill port. We'll take our rod cap back off. And I did make a scribe mark so I know which side went to where. Get this guy off. Set our rod cap off to the side, and we did oil our piston. So there's our mark. There's our mark on the piston. We'll set him in there, and before I shove it down, I'll show you. They do taper this edge so the ring will slide down in there better. It just drops right in. So now that we've got our piston and connecting rod in there, we'll get our bearing support. We'll set him on this side. I think I'm going to put some of that anaerobic gasket maker on here just to be safe. I don't like leaks. This stuff, it looks a whole lot like strawberry jelly. So just a little bit here on the end of the toothpick. We'll just paint some of this around this O-ring seal so we know that it's sealed now. It might make it a bear to get it apart, but we know that we've got good new bearings in it now and a new piston ring, and as long as we keep oil in there, we shouldn't have any problems. We shouldn't have to get back into it because our cam lives on the outside. So we mark this here with which side is up. Get that lined up and drop it down back in here. There. Just like that. So now that we've got our bearing carrier back installed, I'll get the bolts put back in him. Okay, well, we've got all of our bolts tied on here. We'll go around and clean off our excess that squished out, which is a good thing. You know, if it's squished out, it's also sealed in, so that's a good thing. Get us another toothpick here. And I'm sorry about the glare, guys. I'm trying to deal with this light issue. It's kind of a pain when you're working on something as small as this, and to try to get through and see it without having one of those big ring things around the light. But like I said earlier, if you guys have any comments or suggestions on what I should do for lighting, let me know, because I've got an LED light, you know, right up there pointing down at this, and the reason why this black is on here is without it, then you get that goofy light bar that goes through here. So we're trying to learn, and I need you guys to give you suggestions. So, all right, we're back at it. This is our cam side, which is the long side of our crank. So we'll slide our crank back in, and, you know, as before, our bearing is already mounted on there. We'll slide him back in. And we can see that our, well, I can see, you guys probably can't yet, but we've got our connecting rod lined up with our journal. And I was mistaken about this hole. It very well could be, because it is directly in line with this. But this hole is for access to our connecting rod bolts. You guys can see down in there. We can get closer if this thing will focus. So, all right. Well, I will get our rod bolted in, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we got our connecting rod cap back on. I'll make sure it's good and tight. Click. Click. And we have free rotation. It's not binding. Let's get our other cap put back on over here. And as before, I will put just a little bit of that anaerobic gasket material on here, just so we know for sure that it seals up. So here's that gasket material on there. None of it is on the inside surface, so we don't have to worry about it oozing into the engine. If it oozes out, that's great. We know we have enough on there. We'll get this lined up. There. And I keep trying to remind myself to explain to you guys, or at least let you know, that making these videos, a lot of times, this in here wouldn't be quite as bad, but some of them, especially with engines that have sat or are stuck, that need repair, you only get one shot at making these videos. So if it doesn't go through right the first time, you can't go back and wait 20 years or however long it's been since that engine has ran again and remake that edit. So, all right, well, here we've got basically a short block put back together. It turns over, and I can feel very, very, very little play in our crank now. So we've taken a lot out just by replacing those main bearings and putting higher quality ones in it. I'll get this excess gasket material here cleaned off. Okay, well, everything's been cleaned off now. This bottom one, if you remember on the first video when we took this off here, this is the base that this bolts to, and it also holds our inductive pickup. There was oil in there, so that tells me that this O-ring here was not sealing properly. And to get it out, they did drill and tap it so you can put a bolt in there and pop it out. But we're gonna once again use some of that strawberry jelly, and we're gonna seal this so that way we know that we aren't gonna have oil leaks down there on the bottom. So there, once again, we've got just right there on the edge to help seal it. We'll put our little plug back in. And it does set below the surface. So there's nothing holding that in there. So that gasket material will help to seal it up. Alright, well, we don't need to put our base back on. We can't put him back on until we get it ready to go back on our base back here, because that's what holds our timing pickup. So we'll set that over there. We'll flip it back over, and off camera last night I put this in the lathe and I cut a groove in it to, when we get this thing going, we are going to belt it up to that generator and put him to work. But right here is our pickup, so that'll let us know when it fires, and that'll help us to set our valve timing up on top. So I'll get this flywheel tightened down, and then we're going to start looking at how we can set our valve timing. So give me just a second, we'll bring you right back. Okay, well, we got this flywheel mounted back on here, and we know that by looking at our plate here that mounts to the bottom, that it fires when the magnet is down here in the center at bottom dead. Well, not necessarily bottom dead, but bottom dead center on where this magnet's placed. Because without moving that and looking at the top, we are pretty much right on top dead center. So that'll help us get our timing set. In some of our other videos, I've mentioned that like everything else in life, timing is everything. And to get your valve events to happen properly with your ignition and where your piston placement is, that's critical to make any engine run. I do have something that I'd kind of like to show you. If you guys are watching this, you are familiar with engines and how they work, but to those of you that might be fairly new to this, it might be something that'll help. So let me go grab that, and yeah, it'll be kind of fun. So I don't know how many of you guys can remember what it was like to have shop class back when they had things that actually taught you something where it was hands-on and you could see how things worked. This is the same principle as this little M12 that we're working on, but it's big enough for where you can see how things work. So this one has two cams, but still one piston. We have our intake valve and our exhaust valve. And timing is what makes everything work. So right now, this valve is open. We're on our exhaust stroke. It goes closed. Our intake valve here opens. We're drawing in an air and fuel charge. We're compressing it now. And right there, if you can see, just before top dead center, our spark plug fires, forcing the piston down. That's our power stroke. Exhaust valve is open, piston's coming up. We have a slight amount of overlap. Piston goes down, drawing in another charge of air and fuel, compressing it, firing, power, exhaust, intake, compression, power, exhaust. So I'm sure that if you guys are watching this video, you understand how a 4-cycle engine operates. But if you guys weren't 100% sure, at least you got to see how they work. Just a standard single-cylinder engine with overhead valves and rocker arms, much like this little head here with rocker arms. So, all right, I'll get this thing out of the way and we'll keep going with that little M12 build. Okay, now that we've got our work area open back up, let's take a look at this engine again. And the tail end of that last one, I was talking about the helical gear. That's this little guy right here. And it runs on this helical gear. Here's right here is a lobe, and here is a lobe. This is our camshaft, which is centrally driven using this other helical gear. And our lifters are mounted on top here. There's no timing marks on this engine, and there's no flat cut on the shaft back here where this rides. So this is going to be some trial and error work, but we'll get through it. We know it'll work. So, all right, let me go ahead and get this gear back down where it needs to go, and we'll get it snug to where we can adjust it. And then we will put our cam box back on, and I'll bring you guys back then. Okay, sit tight. Okay, so we've got our cam drive gear back on. I did remove this bottom bolt. That way when we go in here to adjust our timing, we'll have more of a swing. We won't hit. We'll set this guy right here. We'll look inside of here, make sure that we put this shim washer back on where it was. I'm assuming it was a shim washer. I don't know that it was a seal washer, but I could be mistaken. I've been wrong many times. Okay, so we've got our little washers back in place. Now we'll take some of this 592 sealant. We'll put it on these bolts just because they do go into the cooling jacket here. And it looks like all this 592 is just pipe dope. For using common words, it's just white pipe dope. So, all right, we've got that on there. Our shim washers are lined back up. Set him back in here and get him back in place. Tighten him down, and yeah, then we're gonna move on with our timing experience. So, give me a second. We'll bring you back. Okay, well, we've got our cam box back on here. Everything engages. Turns very smooth now. We're going to put just a little bit of assembly grease on this, just so we don't start it up dry. And I don't understand, honestly, I don't know how this is supposed to get any lubrication at all. Especially now that we've put sealed bearings in it, so they can't even rely on, the leak coming through those. So we're going to put some grease in here just to lubricate everything. It might come back to bite us when it comes to setting our timing, but at least we know we've got something in there. Alright. And if we look at our other flywheel, we're not going to install it, but we know that our rotation is clockwise viewed from this end. If we remember back to that model that we looked at, we want just a slight bit of overlap at top dead center. And this is our intake side. So by running clockwise, our exhaust valve is opening and we're still going down. So we are way, way, way out of time. So I'll get this guy a little bit closer and we'll see where we're at. Okay guys, well, we've got it, it feels about right. This little thing is so small. So here we are at top dead center. Both lifters are down. So we're going to turn it. Hopefully you can see. And I just felt the exhaust valve start to open right at bottom dead. We're coming back up. Top dead, and the exhaust valve is closed and the intake valve is opening. So we're going to go ahead and fill up our crankcase with a SAE 30 oil. 4 milliliters of oil put in there. I'll take this screw back out when we're done. This is going to keep it from spilling out everywhere. The reason why there's nothing in here is every time that piston goes down, it's going to make crankcase pressure. And it's going to blow it out the seals or any place that's open. So that's why there's not a cap in here. So we're going to we'll take it back out. All right. I guess I'm hoping that we have our timing set about right. We'll get our base. And we're going to mount our engine back to the base. Well, after a little bit of effort, we do have one put back in. Yeah, get started on the second one here. Okay, well, we got both of our push rods back in. Our valves are moving. It doesn't seem to be binding anywhere. It feels, once again, it does feel nice and smooth. I did take the spark plug out. So let's go ahead and run our spark plug back in. And these spark plugs are 1/4 inch by 32 threads per inch. So, all right, let's see if we have compression. It does feel like we have compression. It's not a bunch, but it's possible that we don't have our timing set right. And then we're going to put our fuel tank back in and see if we can make this thing pop off. Well, after several attempts, we'll turn this back on. What I found, it was my fault. Well, I didn't have that spark plug tight. I was losing considerable amount of compression out through there. And I'm not sure that it was grounding properly, but we'll give it another go and see what we can come up with. It's alive and running again. I didn't do anything when it came to changing the hand timing at all. The only thing I can think is it was this spark plug here. So we'll let it run for a little bit, I guess. Let it get some heat into it. We'll take our generator here and bolt it up to it, or belt it up to it. We'll see if it has enough power to make some power. Let this run for a little bit longer. Give it some throttle. does run and it makes power. Not as much power as a angry horsefly, but it does run. It seems to run pretty good. Let me fire it back up and see. Take a running model